All right, welcome everyone to another Peaceful Solutions certification class. Glad you made it again. All right, you can be seated. If you recall, the last teacher, Chris, left off on chapter 2, the effects of character within the family. That's what we'll be talking about tonight. Before we get started, I want to review just a few things that the last teacher went over and what we're trying to accomplish here in this effects of character within the family and getting across to our students. If you'll go to LP2C in your book, in your manual there, we're going to be looking at number 3, where it tells us to have students turn to page 35 to 37 in their handbooks and read the introduction and the section entitled All in the Family. Well, Chris read the introduction last time, so tonight we'll be starting in the section All in the Family. And if you recall, this chapter, he told us that it's it's a touchy subject for a lot of students. You'll find in your classes because, every family has a level of dysfunction, okay? As a matter of fact, just to give you kind of an idea, that word dysfunction, the first 3 letters in that word D-Y-S, it means abnormal, difficult, imperfect. Now, everyone here would agree we're not perfect, right? Because we're here learning the peaceful solution. So, we're trying to perfect our character, okay? But none of us are there yet. So that means that all of us have a level of dysfunction, okay? Dysfunction. D-Y-S, it means difficult, abnormal, imperfect, and wanting or lacking, okay? And there's some other words you can think of that start with that same 3 letters, D-Y-S, like dystrophy, like in muscular dystrophy, which means abnormal nourishment, abnormal nourishment of the muscles. And then there's a word called dyslexia, I'm sure you've heard that, which means difficulty in reading, speaking, or picking out words, okay? So dysfunction just simply means, that it's difficult, abnormal, imperfect. No family is perfect, okay? Now, they can become a perfect family through learning, getting the information, practicing as a family, helping one another come to that goal of becoming the best that they can be in their families. And as Chris said in the last class, even if you're in a family, if you find yourself in a family where, there's a lot of different things going on that are negative. For instance, possibly someone in the family using drugs. Maybe you have an alcoholic father. Maybe possibly your mom's involved in some kind of negativity, or even your brothers or sisters. You can choose yourself to take this information that you're learning in the peaceful solution and become an example to your brothers and sisters and to your parents. We don't have to do what everyone else is doing. We can choose a different path than what others are taking, no matter how old we are. Okay? The youngest child can determine in their mind that I don't want to do the things that I see other people doing around me. I want to make better choices for my life. And you can do that. Anybody can do that. Anybody can choose to do it at any age, at any time. Okay, and that's the beauty of the peaceful solution. But they got to get the information. They've got to have, the knowledge. Remember, knowledge is power. It empowers us to learn what the traps are, what we need to avoid to become the best that we can be. Okay, so as I said, let's turn over now to page 35. Because Chris went over this last class, but I want to just give you a couple of things to think about. In that thought cloud at the top of the page 35, It says character education as taught by the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program is a whole new way to socialize our children. The Peaceful Solution. Well, I know when people see that word socialize, they might tend to think that's talking about socialism. Well, socialism is just a form of a government. This is not, the word socialize that's used here, it means to interact. It's a whole new way to interact. It means to behave in a way that's acceptable to society. And it also means to train for a social environment. In other words, to train our children and ourselves how to behave when we interact with people. Okay? And this is a whole new way, because this way is not being taught in the public school system. Moral character education is not taught. Matter of fact, I can tell you, because we deal with a lot of schools and we've dealt with them for, I know I've been doing it since 2002. There's a thought in the schools that we don't really have time, for character education. First of all, it's not mandated in the state of Texas. In other words, there's no law saying that we have to teach it, but there are other things that are mandated, like math, science, social studies, and other curriculums that they have to teach by law to the students. So it's not something that is being pushed, or it's being offered to students on a daily basis. Now, there are some teachers that we've worked with that have actually put the Peaceful Solution to work in their classrooms. They've taken the initiative. They went to their principal and they said, hey, we found out about a program, and we would like to try it out with the students to see how it works. And wouldn't you know, the teachers that actually, and I'm talking specifically, I can think of one lady. She was a science teacher in a middle school. And she took 20 minutes in the morning every day after going to her principal and getting permission. She started teaching the Peaceful Solution to her students. And, she said, at first it was like spinach or cod liver oil to the students, because it was kind of like, what is this? What is this stuff? What is this you're trying to give us? But she said after 2 or 3 classes, the children, at the end of the 20 minutes that she would teach it every morning, they didn't want to stop. Okay? They started realizing that, wait a minute, this isn't something that we've been getting. And they started opening up about everything. I mean, and that's why I said in this chapter in particular, children will open up, because there's so many things that they go through. There's so much abuse, neglect, certain circumstances in their lives that nobody shares, that they don't share with anybody else, that they don't want to talk about. And quite frankly, they don't even know who to go to talk about it, okay? But when these kind of things come up in what they're learning in this book, it has a tendency to bring things out in people, and they start discussing things, and they see the benefit in it, very soon after they're being taught. And they can't get enough of it. They'd rather go all day learning this. Of course they can't, because they got to learn other subjects, but it's a great thing to see, when the Peaceful Solution's taught. And here's the other thing about those classes. That particular teacher, she said other teachers were coming to her and saying, what is it about your students? I noticed a big change in your students. Like, your students aren't rowdy like the other students, and they're very polite and this and that. And she shared with the other teachers what she was doing in her classroom, and other teachers, thought about trying it themselves. I don't know that they did, but I can attest to this one woman that did, and she had great, remarkable results. But you have to teach it. It has to be taught. Okay, so, and at the bottom of page 35, it says that the role of parents in the family in shaping a positive or negative character cannot be overstated. In this chapter, we're going to learn that character plays a key role in families. Negative or positive character has the ability to destroy a family or strengthen and build the family unit. And, of course, we don't want to see any family be destroyed. Just to let you know, I mean, we have hundreds of people sent to the Peaceful Solution from agencies like CPS that there's some caseworkers that want to keep families together. They want to see the families, there's problems, there's abuse, there's neglect. From sometimes one parent, sometimes both parents. Sometimes there's issues just with the children that they're trying to address. But I don't know. I've seen a lot of things that have the potential to destroy a family. Okay, that things that are taking place in families that we see in the people that are sent to us. But the great thing about the peaceful solution is we know that since this family has never been taught moral character yet, that this is all new to them, once they start learning even the most basic things in the peaceful solution, you start to see a change come over the parent, okay? Because remember, knowledge is power. It's enlightenment. It turns a light bulb on in their brain. And they're hearing things that they've never heard before. They're getting information. It's like seeds being planted in a garden, okay? Things being planted in their head, and it starts to grow. It starts to take root sometimes, and sometimes it's slow. But oftentimes you see remarkable results in a very short period of time, okay? It's not like waiting on a tree to grow 4 years, or something like that. But you'll see sometimes within 1 or 2 classes, a person's mind starts to open up and they start to see the world in a different way. They start to see their family situation in a different way. It's just the thought has to be planted. The idea has to be planted in the mind, because remember, the mind only has what's been put into the mind up to that point. And you can't consider something that you haven't been taught, right? It has to be put in the mind, okay? That's why this is called a character education program. Program is key because you have to program the mind like you program a computer. You have to download the information into a person's mind so they can, like on a computer, pull up that information and consider it, okay? And hopefully use what they've learned and practice it and experiment with it and see if it actually works, because it does work, and we know it works. We've seen some remarkable results with a lot of people with the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program when it's taught, as it's written. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn over now to page 36 and get started on All in the Family. Now, when I think of All in the Family, I think of when I was growing up, that was a very popular TV show. And, Archie Bunker, and his son-in-law, Meathead, he called him Meathead, Michael Stivic. Let's see, Gloria, his daughter, he called her little girl. And then his wife, who he called Dingbat. Very insulting, okay? But this is what I was brought up with. This is what I watched, my family sat me in front of every week. It was a very popular show. And, I kind of saw in my family the Archie Bunkers, and I saw the things that took place. And I'm not putting my family down by any means, but I saw the dysfunction like I saw in the Bunker family, in my own family. But then I also saw a little bit of the Brady Bunch, I saw 6 children, grandma, mom and dad. Grandma was like Alice, right? And there was times that we were like the Brady Bunch, things kind of went well, and, dad tried to, teach some little moral to a story or something at the end of the show, right? So there was a little bit of both. But in my family, there was a whole lot of dysfunction, and I think I was the biggest cause, okay, of the dysfunction that was going on. But then again, remember, was the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program around in 1962? No, not yet, right? And by the time I was 8 years old in 1970, it wasn't being taught in my elementary school. Yeah, we had police officers. I mean, in my age, you never saw a police officer in a school unless they were bringing a dog to show you their dog, okay? So you could pet the police dog or something. Now, police live in schools, okay? And they have offices in schools. They have what they call those places where they have police, those posts. You know, they have these posts, and just like they have in Walmarts, because so many people are stealing at Walmart, they got to have a police officer there, 24 hours a day to make sure, that they can handle the person that's stealing. But anyway, I don't want to get onto a rant about All in the Family, but when I think of All in the Family, that's what it conjures up in my mind. It's not something positive, okay? And remember, it's because the world isn't being taught to think that positive character is cool. But actually, positive character is very cool, okay? It's very cool because it's really cool to be treated the right way, okay? If you actually saw the peaceful solution being practiced on a daily basis by everyone in your school, in your classroom, and by everyone that you interact with on a daily basis at the grocery store, at the gas station, wherever you go, in traffic, it would be pretty cool. It would be really cool. You would love it, okay? Because you would have peace of mind because everyone's practicing, this positive character that we're learning here. And that doesn't bring harm to anybody when you practice positive character. So it says, All in the Family. Have you ever heard someone say, you look just like your dad, or you act just like your sister? Genetics account for similarities in both our physical and our character traits. Now you remember about genetics, we learned about it back on page 4 about heredity. And also, let's go over to page 170 in the glossary. We'll take a look at what that word means there. Genetics. It's on page 170. It says genetics is the branch of biology that deals with heredity, especially the mechanisms of heredity transmission and the variation of inherited characteristics among similar or related organisms or living things. The genetic constitution or the genetic makeup of an individual, a group, or a class. That's what genetics means. Now, you got to remember, some of these words, when you look at these words in this book, some of these are pretty big words. That's why we like to break them down in the Peaceful Solution, because this is only a junior high book, but some of the words I never even heard in high school, okay? So it's really important when you see a word that you think somebody would be struggling with or they might not quite understand, make sure you try to break it down for them and explain it to them. Don't assume they know. Don't assume because they're shaking their head like this that they understand. Ask them. Now, do you understand can you explain to me? Because you'll find out a lot of times they thought they knew what it meant, but when you ask them and they answer, you can find out if they really actually understand fully what it means, and you can actually guide them to understand fully what the word actually means. It says, so genetics. For instance, does your mom cry at sad movies? Do you? I used to. I don't have time to watch TV anymore, but there would be times that I would cry when I saw a movie that was a sad movie. Okay, or if I heard a sad song, I would cry. If the music was just right, they know how to pull your heartstrings in those songs. Okay, these artists know how to make to make the tune to pull at your emotions. Okay, it's very emotional. And it's the same thing with TV. Did you know that when you watch TV, you're actually in a trance state? That's why when mom comes to ask you to take out the trash when you're in the middle of a show, you're like, right now. Wait a minute. Because you're so focused on you're like in a trance state when you're watching television, okay? And it has the ability to play with our emotions, to actually make us think that we're in that situation. And then you start crying, etc. But if you cry at sad movies like your mom, this could be a result of inheriting compassionate character. Remember what compassion was. Let's go back to page 29 real quick, and we'll remind ourselves that word compassion. Compassionate means to care about the needs of others. If you see that someone feels down or sad, you care enough to try and help. For example, your friend lost her wallet, you forego your plans and you help her look for it. That's a compassionate person. It's somebody that cares about other people's needs. You know, well, yeah, it makes me think about my mom. I'm going to talk about my experiences, okay, because that's all I can draw from at this time. You know, I'm a human being. I went through some things, and I can understand what's being said here, and I can look back now, and I can kind of see how these things worked out. What I'd have known then, what I know now. But that it says that, in other words, you have empathy for the characters in the movie. That word empathy means the ability to feel what others feel and to identify with their experiences. It reminds me of my mom when I wouldn't eat any of my lima beans. Okay, you know, lima beans. Beans to me is bad enough. Lima beans? No way. Okay, so when I was 6 or 7 years old, I had a napkin handy, and when Mom wasn't looking, now, Willie, did you eat all your beans? Yeah, Mom. You know, but they were in that napkin, you know, folded up in my pocket. And she would catch me sometimes, and you know what she would tell me? Now, you know, there's children right now in other countries that are starving right now, you know, and I'm thinking in my mind, well, send them my lima beans because I don't want them, okay? And she was trying to, in her own way at that point, in that situation, she was trying to teach me empathy. Okay, she was trying to teach me compassion for other people. That, hey, look, you need to understand that, you know, not everyone has food like you're being given. You need to appreciate it. You need to be thankful for it. Well, that was easy for her to say. I just never, and I still to this day, I'm almost 60 years old, and I still don't like lima beans. Okay, now you'd have to put a whole lot of ketchup on it or something to maybe, or possibly some barbecue sauce or something to hide it because I just couldn't. I've never been able to eat them. But she was teaching me in her own way there, you know, the character trait of of compassion. It says family members also share personality traits. Okay, remember what personality is, our likes, dislikes, our social skills, etc. But unlike character traits, which are sometimes inherited genetically, like, you know, behavioral traits, okay, like aggression, okay, shared personality traits are often learned behaviors. A learned behavior is something you see and then practice, okay? They say monkey see, monkey do. You know, not like any of us are monkeys, but we tend to imitate what we see, okay? And a lot of things that we start to like and take hold of are things that we see other people doing, okay? And that's another reason why we got to be very careful about what we're doing in front of other people, because people learn from us too. You'd be surprised how closely people are watching you. Okay, really, you don't think they're watching you, especially as a teacher in the Peaceful Solution. They're watching you very closely. You know why? Because in their mind, you're teaching moral character, you're already perfect. That's what they're thinking. They're thinking that you've already got this down. I like to remind my students that, look, we're all in the same boat. I might be a little more advanced than you because I've been teaching this a lot longer, but if I didn't have this in front of my face constantly, I would forget how I need to behave too, how I need to be socialized by the Peaceful Solution and taught how to interact with people and how to behave, how to conduct myself. So we're all in the same boat, teacher and student, okay? So it says, a learned behavior is something you see and then practice. It's developed over time and within certain environments. For instance, do you like to go fishing? Anybody here like to fish? I love fishing. I'm from Alaska. You got to love fishing, okay? But you know what? I've never picked up a fishing pole in Texas. And I've been in Texas since 1999. Have not picked up a fishing pole one time. Don't even desire to. You know why? There's not real fish in Texas. I'm used to 100-pound king salmon. You know, we're talking about, you know, and we're talking about fish that it takes you an hour to get to the bank. riverbank, you know? Okay? Because they fight. They don't want to, you know, so it's a different type of fishing, and the fish look different, you know? In Alaska, a 5-pound trout, a rainbow trout, looks like a rainbow. It's very beautiful, and it's very tasty. And I used to love pulling them out of the river when I would fish, and I would gut that thing and take the guts out, and I would put that thing right on the frying pan. Or I would take some foil, and I would take a little bit of butter, possibly some potatoes, and I would chop them up, stick them in that foil, and just throw it on the fire. And I'm telling you, it's the most tasty stuff, but I have not picked up a fishing pole here. And there's fish in Texas I love, okay? I love to eat them. I haven't found the time, number one, but I also don't really have the desire to go fishing in Texas for some reason. Nothing against Texans, okay? Just settle down. You know, Texas and Alaska are a lot alike, right? They're both big. But guess what, Texas? Alaska's twice your size. Twice your size. Okay, let me move on. I don't want to start any trouble here. Okay, so it says, so you like to go fishing. A love for fishing is an example of a personality trait that is learned. Maybe your father or grandfather liked to fish and taught you to value the same hobby. You know what made me love fishing? Was the time my dad took me fishing. And now the first time I went fishing was not a great experience, I can tell you, because I did not know you don't drink lake water. Stagnant lake water, you don't drink it. When I drank that lake water, I just took a little sip because I was thirsty. And for 6 hours on the way back from Fairbanks, Alaska, all the way back to Anchorage, Alaska, all I can remember is throwing up. I got sick from drinking the water. I didn't know you don't drink stagnant water. But the next time my dad took me fishing, I actually caught a trout. And you know what I caught it with? A piece of a hot dog. A piece of a hot dog. My dad told me to try it. And I tried it, and I caught a fish. And my dad was like, wow, look at that fish. And it was probably, only about, a couple pounds. It wasn't real big. But my dad, he put that love for fishing in me, by really building me up when I caught that fish. I knew it wasn't that big, but boy, my dad made me think that was the biggest fish that was ever caught. But I learned to love fish, and I learned to value fishing. So it says, the excitement of catching your first fish and being praised for your efforts made it an experience you learned to value. Remember values. Our values, most of our values are coming from who? Our parents. Okay, they taught us what was important when we were growing up. And we got some new values along the way now. And we've dropped some of the things we used to value. We used to value some, you can value negative things too, not just positive, right? So you can shed those negative values. And that's what we're hoping to do here, is accentuate the positive and eliminate the negative, right? So it says, you therefore have acquired that personality trait. Of course, the same character and personality traits will not be common to all members of the family. For instance, my sister's probably never picked up a fishing pole. I don't remember ever fishing. Okay? But I do remember my brother's fishing. But it says, it might not be common to all members of the family because along with shared traits, each person is born with qualities that are unique. No two people think or act exactly alike. Even identical twins. I told you in a few classes ago that you can be conjoined twins and still have two different brains, and you have completely different goals and dreams and ideas and personality, likes and dislikes. I mean, it's different. And even your character's different if you're conjoined twins. Okay, now it says, for instance, you might resemble your brother. You might look like your brother physically, but you are serious, whereas he loves to laugh at everything. You might be neat and organized, whereas he throws his stuff everywhere. Now, I can tell you right now, my dad, one thing I did inherit from my dad, well, I'll give you an example. My dad smoked cigarettes, which is a really nasty habit. But you know what? Every time he smoked a cigarette and put it out, he cleaned the ashtray. And he was like, he would go around cleaning everything all the time. He was just constantly, if he saw something that wasn't set right on the table or something, he would move it and fix it. And I inherited that. I'm kind of the same way. Okay? And that's not a bad thing. I think some people might think they call that what? Compulsive, what do they call that? OCD? Yeah, they got an acronym for everything, don't they? OCD. So what is that? Obsessive compulsive disorder. Okay, so I guess I'm OCD, you know. I'm not taking any pills for it though. I'm gonna go ahead and just keep that one, because I like having things neat and organized. Some people, I've seen some people, they have a pile of papers and a pile of books and a pile of stuff. I'm looking at somebody right now that's like that on his desk, but he knows where everything is, and it's like an organized mess. Okay. Some people can work that way. Personally, I got to have everything really neat, but that's personality, right? It's personality. Remember, sloppy, organized? Those are personality traits. Okay. So even within the same family, there's many differences and similarities. And isn't that great, though, too, that there's differences? Because what if everybody was the same even within your own family? That would be kind of boring, wouldn't it? That'd be like having fish. No, not fish. That'd be like having chicken every night of the week with salt and pepper. You ever tried that? You know, in the rainforest in the Amazon, there's like 2,000 something spices in the Amazon forest. Okay, alone. All right. Now, can you imagine having 2,000 different spices in your home, where, you know, your mom would cook you chicken. She could cook you chicken every night of the week, and you would ask her every night, "What is this, Mom?" And she would say, "It's chicken." Really? Because she'd use different spices on it every night. You can actually do that. You can actually take those spices and you can make chicken every night of the week, and you would enjoy chicken every night of the week. Same thing with family members that are different. You got to have that spice, that variety, you know. And one thing that we want to be the same is character. We want everyone to be on the same page when it comes to character, you know, being honest, respectful, responsible, compassionate, forgiving. We want everyone to be the same when it comes to that, okay? That's the goal. But personality, everybody's going to be different, and that's okay. It's great. So, it says, the combination of character, personality, environment, and experiences makes each person one of a kind. However, the most significant factors that shape you into who you are your parents and other family members, okay? It is from these two sources that you learn what to value, how to behave, and how to respond to different situations. You know, now it's no secret that I was in a lot of trouble when I was growing up, and I was a thief. Okay, I couldn't keep my hands off anybody's stuff, and even my own parents, even my own grandmother. I would steal from everybody. I didn't discriminate who I stole from. I didn't care as long as I got what I wanted. And the reason I'm telling you this is, you know, I was taught not to steal. I was told not to steal. Okay, I was told it was bad, and I knew it was wrong. But, like, for instance, in certain situations in the household, like watching TV, for instance, we would watch programs. And my mom, she was a big Steve McQueen fan. She loved all the Steve McQueen movies. You know, he was a movie star in Hollywood that he liked to steal cars and rob banks and do jewelry heists and do, you know, high-speed car chases and stuff with the cops. And my mom actually met him one time in Anchorage, Alaska, so she was really obsessed with all of his movies. And when she would watch his movies, she would actually be clapping and hoping he got away. I know I was sitting on the couch next to her, and she was cheering him on, hoping, "Oh, come on, come on, come on, come on." And she was hoping he would get away from the cops. But the funny thing is, when I got in trouble and cops showed up in my house, she wasn't clapping anymore. And I wasn't like, "Go, go, run, boy, run," you know. It was like, you know, it was a totally different experience. Now, she didn't mean to do that. Okay, she didn't understand. Remember, she wasn't taught the peaceful solution, so she didn't understand that everything that we see in our home growing up, it helps to shape the way we think and the way we feel and the way we behave. Okay? It shapes it. It molds us. Okay? And it's very confusing when you're being taught not to steal, but then you see people applauding for people that are stealing, or they're doing something bad on the television, right? We need to be careful of that. You know, we shouldn't be promoting any kind of negativity, negative behavior of any kind, stealing, bringing harm to somebody. You know, there's a lot of movies out there, you know, also that have a lot of, they call them action comedies, where people actually get hurt, but they do things to make it funny so you'll laugh at somebody's pain and suffering. And that's actually going against teaching compassion that we just learned about here. We want people to care about how somebody feels if they're suffering. We want someone to actually care that that person's suffering and want to try to help alleviate that suffering. But if you're programmed to laugh at that, guess what? It's going totally against what we're trying to instill in a person, that care, that compassion, that caring for other people. So remember, it's from these two sources that we learn what to value, how to behave, and how to respond to different situations. And all of these help to shape your character. If you're expected to complete chores, do homework, or help to take care of a younger sibling, you are being taught responsibility. Okay? Now, I know when you're a child, when you're young, I know I was young once too, believe it or not. Okay? We don't look at chores like, my parents are trying to teach me responsibility so when I grow up, I can clean my house. We're not thinking that way. What are we thinking? You're ruining my show. You want me to take the trash out? Don't you see I'm in the middle of, gun smoke or whatever it was? Yeah. I mean, we're really going back now. But we don't think of it that way. We think of it like, what? Dishes? What do you mean? Dishes? I don't like doing dishes. It makes my hands crinkly. Makes my skin all crinkled up. I don't want to do dishes, Mom. But we need to realize that, again, by that act of them asking us to take the trash out, or that act of them asking us to do the dishes, or any kind of chore, they're actually teaching us a positive character trait. As long as they're asking us to do something that won't bring harm to yourself or somebody else, they're actually trying to instill within us a positive character trait. It's called responsibility. And we learned about responsibility on page 17 and page 29. Let's go back and look what responsibility means, just to get it in our head. Page 17, responsibility, it says being responsible is another trait you should want to make part of your character. Being responsible means to be accountable and answerable for your actions. It reminds me of somebody I met long ago. And she was very well-to-do, very rich, per se. Let's just say she was brought up in a very, very high-class society, okay, high society. And somebody asked her to vacuum something. And you know what she said? What is that? A vacuum? She's going to ask me to vacuum that? Vacuum? What is that? How do you even use it? How do you even turn it on? Well, you know what? Nobody taught her how to even pick up a broom or a mop or anything, and how to use. And that's something that all of us need to learn how to do. Now, was it her fault that no one asked her to do it, that she was spoiled? No. But this is what some people grow up with. Some people grow up that way, where they've never learned how to do chores. They've never learned how to do certain tasks and responsibilities. And you know what? They're going to be very inadequately prepared for life when they leave home and they have to do some of these things because they were never trained to do them. So you got to look at these things, children, you younger generation. Look at these things as a benefit. They're actually trying to teach us responsibility. They're actually trying to teach us, to be answerable and be accountable. Like when they ask us to, when they ask us to fess up to something, when they ask us to tell the truth and, give them an honest answer, they're trying to instill within us responsibility and being accountable for our actions. Okay? Now, if you were like me, this is embarrassing, but I got to tell you this. It's embarrassing. My dad was a state fire marshal. My mom was a hairdresser. My dad made pretty decent money, but he didn't make that much money. We had 6 children in the family and grandma, remember? Okay, so there wasn't a lot of money coming in. I mean, we weren't rich, okay? And the point I'm getting at, sometimes I lose my train of thought, but we weren't rich, and I know that my dad did the best that he could, my mom did the best they could to provide us things, but I became very unthankful because I wasn't getting the things that I saw other children in the neighborhood getting, like new mini bikes, new bicycles, new motorcycles, etc. My mom said, I'm never going to buy you a motorcycle. It's a 2-wheel coffin. I'm never going to let you have one of those. And so I started becoming very unthankful, okay? Because I become unthankful, I started to think, well, if I can't get it from my parents, I'm just going to go take it. And I would go out and I would steal things because I didn't appreciate the things that my parents were actually providing for me at that time. Okay? My parents provided me breakfast food, but you know what? I didn't want cream of wheat, and I didn't want puffed rice, and I didn't want puffed wheat. I wanted Count Chocula. I wanted Frankenberry. I wanted the sugary stuff, that wasn't healthy for me. But my parents, they provided what I needed. It's just that I wanted what everyone else was getting. And I thought, you know what? Well, if my parents aren't going to get it, I'm going to go get the money to get it myself. And I would go and steal money, and I would actually go buy groceries. And I would bring those groceries home and put them in my closet. And I would eat groceries out of my closet when my parents weren't looking. Because I became unthankful for the things that they were providing. I wasn't looking at it that way. I was just looking like, well, they're not giving me what I want. But they were trying to teach me to be thankful for the things that I had at that time. Let's go back to page 29, look a little more about person or responsibility. Responsible on page 29. Responsible and reliable. Okay, it means always doing what's necessary to complete the task and be dependent on. For example, your parents have an emergency and must leave the house urgently. They're not worried about leaving you with your younger siblings because they know they can depend on you to care for them while they're gone. So along with that word responsible, you see the word reliable and dependable. Okay, those are tied in with responsibility. Okay, let's go back over to what we were reading here on page 36. So if you're expected to complete these chores and do homework or help to take care of a younger sibling, you're being taught responsibility. If your parents insist that you eat only nutritious foods, then you're being taught to value your health. Again, it goes back to, I didn't see the value in the healthy food. I didn't see the value in the lima beans, or I didn't see the value in the cod liver oil that my mom was trying to give me. At that time. I see it now because I'm more educated and understand what those things do to help us, in our health. But when you're young, you don't see those things as clearly. If you have older siblings who are patient with you, then they are, by their example, helping you to develop the trait of patience. These are only a fraction of the ways your parents and other family members can help you develop your character and personality. Okay? All right, so on this next page, 37, it tells us to write a short autobiography that includes some of the character and personality traits you share with your family. And it says, are there any common traits that are peculiar to your father or mother's side of the family? For instance, do doctors, policemen, or teachers run in the family? Then write about some of the things that make you unique. And this is something you can have students do. Sometimes class time doesn't really permit them to sit there and do all that in a class because you only have so much time, but you can give it to them as extracurricular activity as well. And I was thinking about, I told you my dad was a fire marshal, but I can only tell you, without the teaching of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, I made some really bad choices. And I don't think psychologically I was trying to get back at my dad when I set fires all over the place. Do you know my dad actually had to arrest me once for a fire I started? My own father. I started it in a hotel bathroom, playing around with matches. And my dad, he's an arson investigator, and he came to that and he said, "What did that little boy look like?" What? And then he checked my school and found out I wasn't in school that day. And he took me home that day, and I'll tell you, I got restricted for a long time, but he also sat there and showed me pictures of what those things could lead to for somebody. Showed me pictures of people that had been burnt in fires. And he tried to instill these things in me, this care and compassion and this responsibility and this honesty and things. He did the best that he could, not knowing the peaceful solution. But I told you, I wasn't very cooperative. I really didn't care. I didn't really care about anything. I don't know what was going on in my mind, but I just know that I didn't listen, and I should have listened to my parents, the things that they were trying to teach, because again, they were trying to instill these traits in me in their own way. Okay? So let's look over now. Let's go back to LP. Let's go back to page LP2D. And let's look at number 4. It says, tell students that because family plays such a vital role in the development of character, some problems within the family are extremely harmful to children. Ask students what problems they think can exist within a family that could hinder the development of positive character. And it tells you their answers will vary, but might include like abuse of any kind, alcoholism, depression, mental problems, and so on. And accept as many answers as time permits. Have students turn to page 38 and 41 in their handbooks and read the section entitled, When There Are Problems at Home. Read and discuss the narratives about Ricky and Shantae's experiences found on page 43 and how these affected their character. And allow time for students to answer the questions that follow the stories. So let's go over now to page 38, When There Are Problems at Home. We'll at least get into it a little bit here. Got a little bit of time left. Chris mentioned something in his last class, I think it was the last class, and he said that we need to remember that victims of abuse and the perpetrators are both victims. Okay? And I know it's hard sometimes, I hear a lot, like he said, people, they're ready to hang somebody from a light pole, if they harm a child in any way. But you know what? If you really think about it, we've all brought harm to children in some way. And I was thinking about it earlier today, that because I was looking at the term abuse and what it meant. And physical abuse, part of physical abuse, and I'm looking at in the parenting manual in the Peaceful Solution, it talks about giving a child drugs or alcohol. That's a form of abuse, giving a child drugs or alcohol. And I read that and I was like, you know what? I was a child abuser. As an adult, I was a child abuser. I was in my 20s, and I have a nephew that I used to take to parties because my sister would leave me with the boy, like on a Friday night, trusting that I would take care of him. And I would actually take him because, I wanted to go to the party. I would take him with me. He was only like 4 or 5, the cutest little thing. And everybody loved him. Everybody loved him. They loved him so much that they offered him some hits on their joint. They offered him a sip of beer. And I allowed them to do that. And I did it myself, and we thought it was funny. That's child abuse. So you know what? I stand guilty of child abuse. Okay, so if you think back in your life, and if you look at all the different forms of physical abuse of a child, I'm sure you could probably think to yourself, you know what? I'm probably guilty of that too. So remember what I said. All of us are in the same boat. We're all in the same boat. And the more education we receive in the peaceful solution, the more we start to realize, you know what? I'm really not as, I mean, when it comes to abuse or it comes to, treating people the right way, I'm not what I thought I was. I mean, I'm actually lacking very much myself. I'm not saying I do that anymore. This was years and years and years ago. But that same boy, when he was 13 years old, this was in the 1990s, he started listening to, and children, I want you to listen to this because you think things don't influence you? You don't think that influences are powerful? He was listening to rap music when rap music first came out, and you had the gangster rap. And my sister, she would find those gangster rap CDs and she would throw them away, or she would burn them. And he would get upset because mom kept taking his CDs and burning them. She wasn't buying them for him. He was getting them in some other way. But she started noticing that he started sagging his pants, and he was talking like he was from the hood. And she noticed that it was coming from the music that he was listening to, and she pointed it out to him, and she said, I don't want you listening to that. I don't like what you're becoming. And he was like, oh, Mom, you don't know what you're talking about. It's not affecting me, Mom. It's not affecting me, Mom. And she kept continuing to, when she'd find the music, she'd get rid of it. But, he kept finding ways to get it. Well, one day, the one who thought it wasn't affecting him skipped school with his friend. They burglarized the house, stole a gun. Long story short, that night at a party, he was playing around with the gun like they do, the gangsters, and he shot his friend in the head and killed him. And he did 20 years in Walla Walla State Prison over that. He was only 14 years old when he committed the crime. Now, he got out a couple years ago. He's doing really great, and he's actually a prison advocate now. But you know what? He'll be the first to tell you, it's affecting you. It's affecting you. Okay? We need to be very careful what we're allowing because this is getting into what we're going to be talking about neglect and abuse of children, okay? So when there's problems at home, I'll get started here. It says, just as you are an individual with your own likes and dislikes, your own unique way of thinking, feeling, and behaving, so too are your parents. No two set of parents will raise their children in exactly the same way. Parenting styles differ from one home to the next and are a combination of many factors. That reminds me of when I was growing up, my mom had what she called a rat list. She called it a rat list. It was a list of everything I did wrong while my dad was gone. And that list would be long. By the time Dad got home at 5:30 or 6, it was a big, long rat list. And she would, as soon as he walked in the door, she'd be like, she'd hand it to him and say, you need to deal with this. And my dad, it'd been a long day, probably just like his way of dealing with it was a little different. Okay? My mom would just write it all down. My dad would just take what my mom wrote down and he would get the belt out. And probably get one lick for everything I did on that list. Right? But there wasn't any real discussion about what I did. There wasn't any real teaching about, hey, what you did was wrong. You don't need to be doing that. Here's why not. There wasn't the things explained. It was just pretty much, well, here's the belt because you did it. So they both had a different parenting style, okay? It says, as an adult's experiences, values, and character define what kind of parent he or she will be. Although most parents treat their children with love and respect and provide them with safety, food, and shelter, there are some parents, because of their upbringings and choices, who are verbally, emotionally, physically, and even sexually abusive to their children. Remember again what Chris said. They went through abuse, and it's a continuing cycle. Okay? If there was no intervention, if there was never any intervention to where somebody intervened to help the individual at some point and give them the information they needed to break that cycle, And you know, I've found that the only thing that works to break that cycle is teaching this moral character education. That's the only thing that'll work. Okay? It has to be taught to an individual so they can break that cycle. They got to have the knowledge, the information. They have to have the teacher, the right environment, get the knowledge, the information, and then start practicing it. And they can break that cycle. I don't care who they are. I don't care how many children they've abused. I don't care how they abused them. They can change. Remember what Chris said? You're not hardwired. There's no one hardwired for it. Okay? You can be rewired. Okay? You can rewire a person. In these homes where there's all this type of abuse, parents are often negligent. You know what that word negligent means? You can write this down in your next to your that word negligent. It means careless. Remember what I said? Some parents, they'll actually buy their children violent video games that are doing violent executions and high-speed car chases, killing cops, stealing things, and they don't even know that's what they bought for their child. Until later on, they find out, well, wait a minute, that's the video game my child's playing. I didn't know they were doing that on there. Well, that's because we're being careless. We're being negligent. Okay, we're not being careful. So negligent means careless, irresponsible, lax, L-A-X, inattentive, failing to take proper care in doing something. Okay, that's what negligent means. In other words, they do not provide their children with sufficient food or clothing, nor do they give their children attention or love. Homes where these types of abuses and neglect occur are called dysfunctional homes. And remember what I said about the word DYS and dysfunctional. It means difficult, abnormal, imperfect, lacking, wanting. So guess what? Would you agree with me that every family has a level of dysfunction? Because is any family perfect? No, they're not. So they're dysfunctional in some way. There's different levels of dysfunction, but they're all not functioning properly and perfectly like they can once they get this information and they start practicing it together as a family, or even just one person in a family, like I said, takes hold of the teachings that are here and practices them with their family, practices them in, even though everyone else around them might be doing what they're doing, they can still choose to make the right decisions and behave the proper way in their home. I can see I'm out of time, but what's the date today? Today's the 27th, so the next class will be on the 30th. The next Peaceful Solution Certification class will be on 12:30 at 5:30 p.m. I hope you'll join us. And remember, take these things that you're learning and share them with others, and go back over the material. Prepare yourself for the next class. You're all doing a great job by getting here. I commend you, and continue. Let's continue to build that positive moral character that we desire to see in everyone. So thank you, and we'll see you next time.